The Secrets of Star Trek is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, episode number 37.
Captain to bridge.
Spock here.
Make it so. Surrender is not an option.
Attention crew of the Enterprise, this is James Kirk.
We are all explorers, driven to know what's over the horizon, what's beyond our own shores.
We would have helped you get home if you had asked. That's who Starfleet is.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. Today we're discussing The Sounds of Thunder in the Thunderdome from Star Trek Discovery. Joining me today on the panel are Father Corey Stika. Hi, Father Corey.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, I just wanted a little behind the scenes. The magic of podcasting, you get the episode when you get it. But we were a little delayed starting because we're having some weather here. We're in the Boston area, and I lost power for a couple hours. And so the gentlemen were kind enough to be patient as we got it back. But I was reminded of Scotty. More power, Scotty. Where's those warp engines? We're going to die. Luckily, it wasn't 2 weeks or 12 hours, however long Scotty always estimated. But we're back up and running. I do want to remind you to like The Secrets of Star Trek on our Facebook page, please, and to retweet it on Twitter. Help us get the word out. Write reviews on iTunes and that sort of thing. It helps us get the word out about the show. You know, we're growing our audience, but it's not growing all that fast at the moment. We've kind of plateaued a little bit, and I'd like to get out to among the crowd. There's so many Trekkies out there, but a lot of the Star Trek podcasts, they're a lot alike. I think ours is different and interesting, and maybe you think so too. So if you can share it with folks and let them know that we're here, and that we're talking about interesting things. And right now we're talking about Discovery, but there's so much Star Trek coming. There's so many new series. There's all the old series. There's so much to talk about. So if you could help us get the word out, we'd greatly appreciate it. So Jimmy, before we dive into today's episode, you mentioned that there's some theories out there concerning various timelines in the Star Trek canon, and which we were introduced to, like the idea that there are two timelines with the original series timeline, and then a new timeline with the so-called Kelvin timeline with the J.J. Abrams movies, and now some people are talking about a third timeline. Can you lay out for us what's going on with this theory?
Sure. So the basic idea is that there was a kind of an original timeline that began with Star Trek, the original series, and continued all the way through the other shows, Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, and so forth, all the way down to Enterprise, and that all of those are really set in the same continuity. Then with the J.J. Abrams movies, they launched a new timeline called the Kelvin timeline because of the Kelvin ship that was present at the divergent point. Mm-hmm. And then because of the right situation between Paramount and Viacom, they have a licensing arrangement that seems to require Star Trek going forward to be something like 25% different than the original series and the original timeline in one way or another. It often shows up visually, which is why the uniforms look a little bit different and so forth, even when we're looking at Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. There's a channel on YouTube called Midnight's Edge that has been making the claim that the current Star Trek series, so Discovery, as well as the ones that are in development, including the Picard series and the Section 31 series, are all under this licensing agreement that requires them to be 25 or whatever % different, and therefore that would constitute a third timeline. And the question is what to make of that. Personally, the show's creators for Discovery have led us to think that we're meant to understand that Discovery is set in the original timeline. So this is all happening 10 years before the original series or so. And to me, that's really, unless they come out at some point and say otherwise, that's kind of the determining factor. They've led the audience to think this is not the Kelvin timeline. This is the original timeline. And even if they have to make it look a little bit different for licensing reasons, that's just artistic coloring. It's if they mean us to understand this is the same original timeline, then I'm happy to go with that. I may or may not like the stories they're telling in it, but if that's their intent, then I don't have a problem with that. And I think I know some fans have kind of gotten concerned about this, but I kind of think the MST3K mantra applies, and it's really just to show we should really just relax. So if they mean it to be the original timeline, I think it is, even if for licensing reasons they have to make it look a little different. But that's just my opinion. You may have another one.
Well, I definitely,
go ahead, Father Corey.
I definitely agree with Jimmy on that. Now, I haven't watched the Midnight's Edge, but I've seen some of the other commentators, Lore Reloaded, and a couple others who've kind of taken this up, and I almost have the feeling that this is taking an element of the contract that may or may not exist. I mean, I don't think it's ever been actually confirmed that this requirement even exists at all, and trying to use it to justify why Discovery really isn't Star Trek. Is ultimately what it comes down to.
Right.
There's a lot of fans that aren't happy, especially with the first season and how it did seem to change canon. But of course, now in the second season, they have definitely been making an effort to try to pull it back to canon,
which I think was always the plan. They always intended to sync it up with what we'd seen before. It was just they were starting from a different point.
Exactly. And I don't buy it. I obviously the movies, the J.J. Abrams movies are a different timeline. They've always intended to be a different timeline. But to say that this is a third, you've got original timeline, Kelvin timeline, prime timeline, that sounds more like fan wishful thinking, in my opinion, than it does any kind of legitimate issue.
Yeah. Also, if you look closely at the so-called original timeline, it's actually more than one. Stuff gets rewritten periodically in that with time travel stories. Yep. And like a classic example of that is the Deep Space Nine episode where Miles O'Brien is traveling around in time, and and one version of him gets radiation poisoning and dies, and it's the alternate Miles O'Brien who takes over for the entire rest of the run of the series.
Which is also something we saw in Voyager when Harry Kim and Naomi Wildman end up on another Voyager, not their original one, and they're the ones who journey home on that. It's happened several times.
And that's where Doctor Who has the right idea. Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff.
Yeah.
Let's stop doing that for people. Yeah.
As a comic book fan, I'm so used to reboots that it's like, okay, you're telling me these stories, and they're all out there in the multiverse. Right. So it's just a question of what part are we looking at right now.
As fans, we want everything to hold together, to cohere into a unit of whole that we can imagine is real. And I get that. I agree with that. I would love it too. But I also love that it doesn't look like the Discovery was made in the 60s either. One thing I want to say about Midnight's Edge in particular, I enjoy his videos. He researches these things very well, and he knows the corporate politics aspects of this stuff. And I think deeply and intimately to a degree I wasn't aware of some of the stuff. Although I wonder how much that colors his perception of how he interprets the creative aspects of the show.
Right.
Just I think of even like related to today's episode, Sounds of Thunder, and how that relates to the Short Treks episodes, and some of the things he said about Short Treks. If that's true, there's some differences with, and we'll get into it. The differences that affect this episode. I don't know. I just want to kind of say that just because the corporate reality is a certain way, there's always, no matter how well versed you are, there's always more deeper, especially these huge corporations with thousands of people involved. There's more to the story than we're ever aware of. So this idea that corporate licensing agreements require certain percentages here and there, and how that plays out, I'm with you guys on this. I just want to watch this and enjoy it on the terms that it's given to us. So, all right. So that's an interesting conversation. And folks, if you have any of your own opinion on this or feedback on this, or we missed any information, let us know. Trek@sqpn.com is a great way to send us an email, or on Facebook or on Twitter. And we'll give all the contact information again at the end of the show. So let's talk about today's episode. This episode is titled The Sounds of Thunder, and it features a return to Saru's home planet of Kaminar, where they confront the Ba'ul. A red signal from the Red Angels brings them to Kaminar, and they confront the Ba'ul, the oppressor species for Saru's species of the Kelpians, and we have this whole situation brought to a head. So, and then there's a subplot of Hugh Culber, the resurrected man, dealing with his return from the dead, essentially, and what does that mean? And it promises to play out further as episodes go on. So, let's start at the beginning. Just the idea that I guess the short treks were not completely throwaway stories. And it explains why the one episode that wasn't set on the ship was set on Saru's home planet, because they had the sets available for this episode.
Yeah, they must have filmed them around the same time. Yeah.
And so we start with a voiceover from Saru this time, which is different from what we've been getting, which is a voiceover from Burnham. And he says, we all come from somewhere. We carry that place with us wherever we go. That never leaves our hearts, not entirely, but none of us can predict where our voyage will lead. We may suffer losses along the way, but we can hope to learn and grow from those experiences and from those who accompany us on our journey. And really, these narratives, these little voices over the beginning, are really setting out the show, this episode. That's I've noticed that's what they're essentially doing, is setting out sort of the lesson we're going to learn at the end of this episode.
They're better than the Chris. They're better than the Chris Carter monologues on the X-Files. Those were really overwrought.
Yes. So we learn that Burnham and Tilly and the Borg-like crewman, the cyborg crewman on Discovery,
Arisa or whatever her name is.
Yeah, I can't remember. All these new crew members, I'm still learning their names. They're going over the records recovered from that ancient sphere from a few episodes ago that caused Saru's transformation through the Vahari, which is a critical element in today's episode. And meanwhile, and so Saru is getting checked out about his Vahari in Discovery sickbay, and that's where he notices Hugh, Dr. Culber, is still recovering from his resurrection. He's getting examined. And Hugh says he doesn't. I don't feel like myself. And Saru tells him, enduring something no one thought possible can be transformative. And of course, he's talking about himself in that way as well. And that again will bear out through this episode.
So we should probably mention what Vahari is for people who may be unclear. It's a stage in their life cycle for Kelpians where they've been told they're going to go through this, and it means they're ready to be harvested as food by the Ba'ul to maintain the great balance on their home planet so that their ecosystem won't get out of whack. And if they don't turn themselves over to the Ba'ul, they'll go mad and die anyway. And so last episode, the sphere, Mogo, triggered Saru's Vahari, and he went through it and didn't go mad and didn't die, and his threat ganglia fell out. And so now he's like convinced the whole great balance thing is a huge, enormous lie. The Ba'ul have told his people, and he's really mad about it. And he's also got new spiky things growing in place of his threat ganglia. The doctor tells him
those spiky things, which will play a part later in the episode, are kind of cool. I wonder if we'll ever see them again.
Yeah,
if they're a one-time thing.
And as soon as I saw them on the thing, I said, "Oh, this is going to bode aggression on Saru's part, because he's going, what even is a Kelpian without fear? Well, if he's got spiky things growing in his head, he's going to be aggressive."
Right.
Well, and that's played out throughout the episode. You see him get much more aggressive, much more assertive, especially to Captain Pike.
He gets positively insubordinate on multiple occasions.
Yeah.
Right.
To the point that there has to be intervention between them to keep from getting worse.
Yeah, Burnham's the level-headed one.
That says a lot about this episode.
Yes. Usually it's Saru being the level-headed one. He says something to Hugh in the sickbay. He says, "Perhaps in feeling less like you are feeling more like what you were meant to become." Is this just an empty platitude, or is there some truth in this? What do you think of this? Is this like a Hollywood screenwriter sort of meant to sound profound thing, or is there some?
I'd argue that's part of it. I would argue part of it is it's kind of teasing forward to the rest of the episode.
Right. What Saru's become.
Also, given the closing monologue in the previous episode about is there a greater hand guiding us or not? One of the religious themes they're exploring. I think it plays into that as well.
Okay. All right. So moving from this scene, we go to section Ash Tyler is meeting with Burnham and Pike, and he says Section 31 believes the Red Angels can create time incursions. So it was mentioned last time. Now they've really come solidly out about this. Like they're really planting the flag in the ground about time travel being an aspect of this. And then he asks, and Pike says they're not dangerous. They're leading us to places where we fix things. And Tyler brings up what I think is a good point. Are they leading Discovery to crisis points to fix them, or because they created them? And
one thing that I noted in this episode, and I thought this was a flaw in the writing, both with Ash Tyler and Saru, is they're both like one note, resist whatever Pike says.
Yeah.
And so it's like both of them are just at every turn rejecting whatever Pike says. And it's like, guys, he's the commanding officer here. You need to show a little bit of deference. And even if you have another viewpoint, you need to express it in a way that just doesn't directly confront him at every turn.
See, with Saru, I excused it, if you will, because of him
Life
learning the issues going on with his changes and everything and all that. That was I thought excusable. With Tyler, he seemed just unnecessarily antagonistic. It's just every time he turned around, he was, and even something you hadn't seen in the previous episodes with him, where he was immediately like, "Oh, this is bad. This is wrong. We need to kill it." You know?
Right. I feel like the story as a whole, the plan for the story was good. I like the idea that we're dealing with Saru's homeworld and this very strange relationship with the Ba'ul and all of that. I just didn't feel like this was a very well written episode. I just didn't feel like this wasn't as good to me as others. I kept running up at points of saying that's not how that should go. That just is not a. I mean that you kind of dropped something there, or it just fell flat. And I don't know what there was several times where I felt like, well, why did it go there? I just didn't feel it was such a very, very well written episode.
I agree. I thought the writing was too paint by numbers. I thought it needed to be more sophisticated than it was. Even though I can excuse the fact that Saru has just had a major life change, he should be more reserved than he is. We can see him struggling to accept what Pike says. We can see him reining in his insubordination, but he shouldn't just be flat out insubordinate. His training is too good for that.
Or go the next step and say he's being so belligerent because of the changes. Come right out and say there are physiological changes in him that are causing these psychological differences, and make that part of the story. But
in which case he should be off the mission immediately.
Right. Yeah. To Pike's credit, he tried to do, but then didn't.
I was just going to say that, Captain Pike tried to get that little hint in there. But of course, there was Saru said, "Well, I'm the same person." It's like, well, you're not acting like the same person. And
Also,
there was no calling him on that, saying, but you're not acting like the same Saru you were 2 days ago before this all happened.
Yeah. Also, Pike is just totally lying to him about like, "Oh no, I don't question your integrity at all. The thought wouldn't even occur to me," when you just questioned his integrity.
Exactly.
So I mean, don't lie to the life transforming alien right now, okay?
Right.
For me, the big problem though was that that they're gonna wreck the Great Balance, and the way they did it was inelegant because they do this interesting song and dance about, are we violating General Order Number 1? And technically, no, we're not, because the Ba'ul got warp drive 20 years ago. Apparently, at the exact same moment, Saru made contact with the Federation, which caused the Federation to make contact with the Ba'ul. And they, even though they took Saru, they said, we're not going to interfere beyond that. And so technically, since the Kelpians have seen warp technology somehow from the surface of the planet, they can be contacted without it violating General Order Number 1, although they're pressing it. Okay, so fine. You've given me an interesting rationalization for why you can make contact with the Kelpians. But you know what doesn't work is, let's totally wreck this planet's political racial balance thing. I mean, that's a major diplomatic thing that a Starfleet captain is not going to be empowered to do. Now, I tried rationalizing to myself, well, didn't we see Jim Kirk do this repeatedly in the original series? He just, oh yeah, let's shut down the computer that's running this whole planet and force their society to start evolving in another way. So Kirk did that, but Kirk is not Pike. They've made a point. Pike is a rule follower. He doesn't do the crazy Kirk cowboy stuff. And to have him just go along with totally wrecking a planet's culture is not something that he should have just accepted and gone along with it. There should have been much more discussion and objection and everything. I think it was bad writing on the part of the creators, because they know where they want to go morally. They want to get the Kelpians out from under the Ba'ul. And that's fine. That's a great goal. We all want that. But the question is, how do you get there? And you don't have your rule-following captain just go along. I mean, could you imagine Picard doing that?
Yeah.
Right. You know, he's Mr. Diplomacy. He's not going to just wreck another planet's culture, even if it's not a member of the Federation. And so that was bad. And then also the story they tell about, oh, actually the Kelpians were the original predator species. And now that they've all gone through Vaharai and they've all become predators, and their predator instincts reemerge as soon as they go through Vaharai, as illustrated by Saru, they're going to make a peaceful future with the Ba'ul and nobody's going to try to get retribution? Really?
Right. There feels like we're being told an analogy story here. What I thought was going to happen, and which I would have preferred, frankly, is that we were going to find out that the Ba'ul are not predators, that they're not culling the Kelpians as a food source, but were in fact the evolved post-Vaharai Kelpians, and then create but they were an aggressive species, and that they were shepherding the Kelpians, not as food, but to help them progress to this other stage, and that would create a moral quandary for Saru. And that's always the best kind of Star Trek story, is where there's a moral quandary, where you see a good here and a good there, and you're trying to figure out what is the good that I need to follow here. And that would have been, frankly, better than this episode, because what do we get in the end? We get the all see where, the good guys win, the bad guys lose. We've, rah, and everything's going to be all better now on this planet, even though we've completely turned everything upside down. Yeah.
What I wish they would have done was something a little bit more morally, now I don't want to say ambiguous, but subtle, where maybe, instead of having the Captain Pike go along with it, Burnham's broken the rules in the past. Right. Why didn't they just have where Burnham kind of snuck around behind Pike, and then you have to have the scene where he's dressing her down for doing that? I mean, there's so many ways they could have done it, where they could have told that story and not gone to this loose. Yeah, where all of a sudden now Captain Pike's fine with throwing out General Order 1. Right. No problem doing it. And doesn't even think anything of it because some loose they happened to, some of the Kelpians happened to see Lieutenant Giorgio's shuttle take off into warp, so it's good enough.
Yeah.
Is that how you took it? I thought they had seen. The message was that they had seen Baul warp technology, though I may be mistaken about that.
No, I think they said it was that because the Baul had warp technology that they were that at
least they were familiar with the idea.
Right. Yeah. The only person who saw Giorgio's shuttle was Saru's sister, from what I understand, and so that wouldn't be enough to make them set the rule aside, the general order. So speaking of Saru's sister, it turns out she's the new priest of the village. Saru's dad has been culled, and so she's now there. I did like this element where his sister was kind of mad at him because
that was nice.
Yeah, there's this whole idea of like, he's like, I'm back. See, I went to the stars and I had this wonderful experience and I wanted to come back and share it with you. He's like, yeah, when you were gone, we thought they took you because you were violent. You were basically a heretic, essentially, and we were waiting for them for years. We thought they would come back and take revenge on us and have retribution on the village, and we lived in fear of that. So thanks for that, Saru.
Yeah.
That was nice. I liked how she is like, we spent years in fear because of you. Thank you.
Right. So that was a good moment. Then we have the encounter with the Baul now confront the Discovery in orbit. They realize
big ships, much bigger than Discovery.
Yes, that look like the pylons on board on the planet, and they realize that Discovery has some of their property, quote unquote. Saru. Pike has to kick Saru off the bridge. He becomes so belligerent and insubordinate. And
he shatters a panel.
Right.
Just grabbing it. All the glass breaks.
And all aliens in Star Trek, by the way, are stronger than humans. I just want to point that out.
Of course, yeah.
So did anyone else find it, like, as soon as he left the bridge, did anyone else, like, say, oh, he's going to the transporter room and he's going to beam down? Like, so obvious.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was very obvious. I did like, though, as he's walking through the hall and he's like swaying his arms from side to side behind him. And I thought that was a neat alien bit of body motion.
Yeah, Doug Jones as the actor has really got Saru's physical presence down. And they have the actors have to wear these high heels, sort of walk on the balls of their feet, sort of prosthetics on their feet. And the other actors, I could see them struggling, especially in the sand of the beach on the planet, trying to stay upright. I can't imagine how many times they must have fallen over at one time or another. But Doug Jones is just such an expert playing this type of character. But I do love how he has really created this full person of Saru, and including the body movements and that sort of thing.
Like Leonard Nimoy did with Spock and the hand gestures and stuff.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, now what I realized he's going to beam down, but what I didn't realize is he's planning on sacrificing himself to save the sister. I thought he was just going to beam down and make trouble, because clearly he's headed for making trouble.
Right. Yes, he was going to beam down to be taken by the pylon in his village
to save the Discovery.
Right. And then we find out this is
also, I liked Michael was willing to stun him to stop him.
Yes.
And then, but he uses against her, her own search for Spock. I was going to say, that's a different movie. That's a different movie.
Everybody's thinking it.
He gets taken up into the Baul ship, and he's in this room with a big hot tub, and
it's really creepy.
Yes, it
including the sounds. The sounds the Baul and their tech make are really disturbing.
Right. The voice of that Baul is really, I gotta say, well done. I mean, it is extremely effective and creepy, and the look is wow. I have a hard time believing they're not the predator species on that planet.
It's like the Skin of Evil, only scary.
Yes, only scary. That would have been a much more effective Skin of Evil of that TNG episode.
Also, the Baul do something sensible, which is they don't, even though one of them sort of maybe appears, I don't know if for sure that's a real Baul or just an animation of one.
Right.
But but they also use drones
Yes.
to interact with their prisoners, and that makes a lot of sense. You know, why risk one of your own people when you can send in a drone to do what needs to be done?
Exactly. And this is where we get the revelation, the simultaneous discovery on Discovery of the data from the Great Sphere about the history of the planet, and from the Kelpians, this idea that the Great Balance, like we said before, is an invention of the Ba'ul to keep the Kelpians in check, because they were in danger of making the Ba'ul extinct, thousands of years ago. And then there was this switch over where the Ba'ul figured out how to I'm not exactly sure what exactly the mechanism would have had to be for a tiny, almost extinct species to overcome the predator species.
They said it was their advanced technology, and that doesn't make a lot of sense, because if they had advanced tech, why did they almost get wiped out? I would assume that we can headcanon that as they did almost get wiped out, and then they invented the advanced technology that gave them the upper hand.
Right. But they didn't wipe out the Kelpians. They just
managed them. Which is actually a sign that they're not entirely evil, because they were about to be wiped out themselves, and they did not wipe out the people who were persecuting them.
They did get close. I mean, you look at the numbers, and it's down to like 500 Kelpians on the entire planet, uninvolved Kelpians, something like that. I can't remember the exact number, but it was a very low number.
Oh, was it?
And then
okay, I didn't catch that,
because they did wipe out all the evolved Kelpians, quote unquote.
So, speaking of drones, I did like this moment where the
drone bashing.
Well, the Ba'ul go full Bond villain in this moment. So Saru is tied to the wall, and they send in the drone with the overly elaborate spinning blade thing to kill him. Just shoot him. Just shoot him.
Yeah,
if you're going to kill him, shoot him in the face. Not like, I will send a drone with a scary spinning blade to threaten to cut off your face, but not quite until you get a chance to free yourself. Like, come on.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
Yeah, exactly.
They did say they would be analyzed and then disposed of. So presumably the scary spinning thing is gonna help them analyze him somehow. I don't know. Vivisect him, maybe.
Maybe. It looks like it was about to blend him. Vita Veggie mix.
But then we do get to see a nice scene of Saru smashing drones.
Yes. So meanwhile, we have Saru and his sister sitting next to this pool where the Ba'ul just appeared, talking about their plan to put all the Kelpians through Vahara. And I'm thinking, is there no one still in the pool? Like, is that guy gone? Like, did he swim out through the tunnel underneath? Where'd he go?
That's one of the things that made me wonder: is that actually a Ba'ul or an animation of a Ba'ul that you can turn on and off,
basically like a hologram type thing or something like that,
physical hologram.
Yep.
But as we've seen from the that Short Treks episode, Ba'ul technology is essentially plug and play, like Legos. Apparently, that you could just take random pieces, put them together, and make first you make a communicator, then you can make a device to control their ship, and apparently make a bow tie at the same time. I don't know, but it seems plug and play. And then rather than let the evolved Kelpians survive, the Ba'ul decide that they're going to commit genocide.
Yeah. And they're going just to tie up a point there. So they get using information from the sphere, which triggered Saru's Vahara.
Yep.
They figure out the sound waves they need to broadcast in the planet's atmosphere to trigger Vahara in everybody.
This intense, painful experience.
Yeah, and so they are going to do this to expose the lie of the Great Balance, and trust us, it's going to be really great, and no one's going to want payback after that's done. So Captain Pike should be A-okay with the plan.
Yes, Saru says they won't give in to rage, trust me, because all Kelpians are just like me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's working out so well.
Yeah, not increasing confidence here.
Yeah. So and then rather than let the Kelpians evolve, the Ba'ul has decided to commit a genocide. So they have their Stargate Atlantis city rise from beneath the waves.
Yeah,
just like it's Stargate Atlantis, and they are going to, in this elaborate long procedure, connect all of the pylons. Then it will take just enough time that there can be an intervention. And then the Red Angel shows up and basically
Angel Ex Machina.
Yeah, basically deactivates the Ba'ul technology. And we have this conclusion that the Red Angel set this whole situation up for Discovery to distract the Ba'ul so that it could then do this. But if the Red Angels are this powerful, why do they need Discovery at all?
Yeah, I know. Why aren't they doing this? It creates a big problem from the writing. If the Angels are the inciting thing to provoke this encounter, and then they're also the solution to the encounter, why don't they do it themselves?
Right. It doesn't make. I mean, hopefully there's an explanation coming, but it doesn't feel like it based on this episode.
I think that they are trying to say that there is limits to the power of the Angels, but they're not doing a very good job of showing that.
Well, the limits based on what they showed us before should be much higher than what they've had to do in this one. The limit they imposed in this episode, unless it's a situation of no, we're trying to get you to participate in our good deed. That's the only
That's the only sensible way to do it. I don't know if they'll pay that off though.
So I sent a screen capture of this scene to my co-hosts here when I was watching it. I got a nice big clear screen capture, and they referred to this in the episode, which is that the Red Angel that shows up, Saru, whose vision is better than humans, gets a good look at it, and we do too. We see what the Angel looks like without the blown out highlights of the light behind them, and it looks like
Isaac. It's Isaac from the Orville.
It's Isaac, right? It's essentially someone in some kind of spacesuit or technology.
Which fits in with the time travel theme they've established for the Angels now.
Yep. And two arms, two legs, a head, 5 fingers, and I don't know how many toes. We don't see those, but 5 fingers in each hand. So it's pretty clearly humanoid.
And kind of a feminine body shape too. You know, at least the way I saw it.
Yeah, in broad outlines. Yeah. No pun intended.
Also, the mentioning the time travel theme, that's something I predicted last week, because the title of this episode, The Sounds of Thunder, is apparently a reference to one of the most famous time travel stories ever, A Sound of Thunder. That's the famous story where you go back in time to hunt dinosaurs and you step on a butterfly and it alters your future. That's the famous story that the title of this episode is a reference to.
Right.
So the Red Angels, the butterfly fighting back.
Right. That's an interesting point because there's wings. So now Section 31 in the guise of Ash Tyler are now freaking out. These advanced technology, they're going to use it against us. We have to fight back against them. And Pike's like, I think you're being a little paranoid here. Assuming that any advanced technology is inevitably going to be used against us.
Right.
But that's sort of Section 31's mission, right?
It's also because Pike refers to the threat assessments that Section 31 is doing. And actually, that's what a threat assessment is. Yeah. You say, what can these people do to us, regardless of whether they're our friends or not? Right. What could they do to us? That's the threat assessment.
We have to assume, that's Section 31's job is to assume worst case scenario and how do we deal with a worst case scenario, hoping that the worst case scenario never happens, but being prepared for it.
Yeah. And then Tyler stalks off without being dismissed.
Right.
Yep.
Insubordinate Klingon. So we have this final scene where Saru, his sister, is visiting aboard the ship, and then he takes her to the transporter room and she leaves. And so you have Saru and Burnham in the transporter room, and Saru thanks Burnham for her help, and Burnham quotes Aeschylus, the Greek tragedian, who with this line, "He who learns must suffer, and even in our sleep, pain that cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart." There is more to the quote, though, and the rest of it goes, "And in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom to us by the awful grace of God." I find that part now actually gives some meaning to the rest of it, which is, even in the tragedies and sufferings that we suffer, there is wisdom that we earn but through the grace of God.
Right.
So there's something to this to this message. And in fact, a famous use of this quote in real life, Robert F. Kennedy quoted this on the night Martin Luther King was assassinated. He was giving a speech, and he added he put this in his speech and added, I think it's sort of relevant. I don't want to get political, but he says, what we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, a feeling of justice to those who still suffer in our country, whether they be white or whether they be black. And it's interesting to kind of put these things together into this episode and to see what maybe whether it's Saru Burnham trying to say this or the screenwriters are trying to say to us. What do you think of this sort of chain of quotations?
Well, I think it's kind of funny, talking about, wisdom coming from God, because the day we record this, the first reading was the beginning of the book of Sirach, and it begins with all wisdom comes from God.
Right.
I mean,
interesting.
that paraphrase, I'm trying to pull up the actual passage. Yeah, it was. All wisdom comes from the Lord, and with him it remains forever and before all time.
Very nice. It's interesting for all time. Time travel.
Yep, exactly. But it's just kind of interesting that link that happened just on the day we're recording this with that scripture again, that idea of that wisdom that we're seeking. Right.
Even in tragedy, even in suffering, which Saru and his people had suffered. I mean, and I think maybe that's the idea is, the incredible suffering that your people, the genocide your people have suffered already, not just even that they were going to be wiped out, but all the Kelpians who have died at the hands of the Ba'ul. There's still a possibility of wisdom through that. Not that the suffering was good, but that you have wisdom despite that.
Yeah, and that's a nice Hollywood sentiment, but that's not what would happen in real life.
Right.
The people on the Discovery are far too naive about this situation. They should have anticipated that if you suddenly try to turn all of the prey into predators all at once,
right?
Genocide is the obvious solution. Do it while we can.
Right.
So they should have been able to anticipate the genocide. And then after the Red Angel intervenes, okay, you may have smashed all of the watchful eyes for all of the 4,100 villages of these people. But now that the Red Angel's gone and when the Discovery leaves, immediately the Ba'ul are going to start massacring Kelpians while they still have a technological advantage over them, because now they're dealing with a race of predators.
But they don't have the technological advantage that was taken away by the Red Angel.
No, they smashed the watchful eyes, but that's not going to be the extent of their technology. They're still going to have guns and things.
Well, they shut down all of their city and everything is smashed. I don't know if you noticed that, but they, like, when you saw the city in the background from the beach, it was sort of like smashed and semi-sunken.
I'm assuming there's more than one Ba'ul city, and that 50-kilometer wide base or whatever it was may have been smashed. But I don't think. I mean, if they meant us to understand that they reduced the Ba'ul to the Stone Age like the Kelpians, they did not communicate that.
Well, and they even kind of sort of address this when they're making the argument whether or not to do the Vaharai, and they said, well, the Kelpians or the Ba'ul will be fine because they've got the superior technology.
Right.
Implying that it'll be several decades before, the Kelpians or the Ba'ul are really a threat from the Kelpians.
Well, regardless of whether the technological solution, you're right, Jimmy. What they've done now is they're leaving after having instituted a war. There's now a full-on, worldwide war between these two species on this planet.
Exactly.
That they've instituted.
Not all of them. Not all of the Kelpians are being quite as pacifistic and gentle as Saru's sister, who's has her head in her clouds that everything is going to be perfect now. And now we'll have the new balance that everything is going to be wonderful.
Yeah, and by the way, for a priest, she's remarkably okay with finding out her faith is a lie. I mean, she adapts to that really fast.
Well, even just the idea that there are people in the stars and, hundreds of thousands of different types of life forms out there and all that. She's like, oh, wow, that's great.
As As
I had more. I could buy that. I mean, it's saying, okay, there are people out in the stars, fine. But wait, what? My whole faith has been a lie?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this the whole idea of that the great balance is like is a religion. I have a hard time with it. I mean, what kind of religion is it?
Admittedly, ecology is a religion for some people here on Earth. So
I guess. I mean, like, what are they worshiping? What is the shape of this religion? It just like the Baul aren't the gods. But some idea of a balance is, and it just is a kind of a weird. Like, what form does this religion take?
Well,
it's
so
closer
you can
to
have
something like an Eastern mysticism or something like that, where it's not the worship of a god.
Right.
I think that's kind of a misinterpretation of religion in our world today. Is religion must have a god that is worshipped. Yeah.
I was just going to say, Theravada Buddhism, the original form of Buddhism, is agnostic about the existence of deities. The idea is there are these cosmic principles you need to live by if you want to get out of reincarnation. And so I think it's something similar here. Whether or not they have a god, their religion is practically focused on maintaining the cosmic balance.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good point. Whether they don't explain that per se, but that would be a common misunderstanding, I think, for folks watching. Is what kind of religion is it?
Yeah.
So following this, Burnham has decided, upon seeing what Saru has done for his sister, that she needs to go home to Vulcan, and I'm not sure what the two have to do with each other.
She's probably expecting to take all of the passive Sirenite Vulcans and turn them into predators against the logic extremists.
It must be it. But the bottom line is that we're going back to Vulcan in the next episode, and we see in the previews for next week that we're finally going to see Spock, that he's going to finally show up in the 8th episode of the season, where we're at. And
the halfway point.
Yeah, it's the 7th episode. So yeah, we get halfway through the season, and we're gonna see Spock. So,
hopefully,
they showed him in the preview,
I know,
but I know it's not beyond.
They showed him in the what turned out to be the season preview too at the end of the first episode.
That's true.
Yep.
That's true. So they've been very cagey about episode titles, by the way. They haven't released them officially until the coming next week bit of every episode. But there have been certain episode services, like the TV Guide type services out there, that have leaked them a little bit. So we know that the next few are the next one's Light and Shadows. Then, if memory serves, Project Daedalus, The Red Angel, which should be an interesting. And then Perpetual Infinity. And those are the next titles we have. And then there are at least 3 more episodes in the season after that. So I don't know if the Red Angel one will be the climactic point of this storyline or not, but certainly interesting.
We better get some more information substantially about the Red Angel if they're going to call it that.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I had a few little things to tie up, if that's okay.
Yes, I was just going to ask.
I liked the alien color scheme on Kaminar. A classic problem of sci-fi with alien planets is they either look exactly like Vancouver, or they have bizarre, unearthly color schemes that are just totally Star Trek. The original series doesn't look like any color scheme. That it's just like day glow colors. And here they took natural colors and I guess using, CGI and color filtering, they tweaked them so that they look different than Earth, but they don't look day-glow garish.
Right.
And I liked that color scheme. I wanted to give the special effects guys credit for that. When Tyler asks the question, is the alien leading us to crises to fix them, or is it causing the crises? My first thought was, well, what's the Star Trek answer? The Star Trek answer is always going to be the generous one that expands the circle of compassion. So, of course, the aliens are leading us to these crises. I liked when we got a moment of Saru speaking to his sister in Kelpian. They had clicks in their language, like Xhosa, and other Earth languages use clicks. And so it was nice to hear the clicks in the language, because that's different than English and a lot of European languages. I did, though, kind of balk a little bit when Sirana asks Michael, do humans from Earth drink tea? And it's like, okay, tea is a specific plant here on Earth. I guess this could I guess that they have an equivalent of tea made out of these flowers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but it immediately set off the linguist in me wondering, okay, so what did she actually say in Kelpian? Was it like, do humans from Earth drink boiled leaf water? Wasn't sure about that.
We drink tea, but I'm not sure we can drink this, if it'll kill us or not. But
yeah. We didn't mention that the spikes growing in Saru's head turn out to be darts that he can reflexively fire as he does at the Baul. And then just a couple of themes that have become annoying to me in recent episodes. One of them, we have another, and this one isn't major, but we have another instance of Michael not answering questions regarding Spock. This time, Tyler says to her, have you thought of anywhere we might look for Spock that hasn't occurred to us? And then before she can answer, something intervenes.
Right.
And so we have another of that. But what I found even more annoying, because it at least this time, the Michael question wasn't one where she refuses to answer and it's personal about Spock. Like, what did you do? So this was of a lower order, but what was not of a lower order, yet again, in this episode, we have the theme of we've got to risk everybody on this ship to save one crew member. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many times has that happened this season already? I can think of at least 3 cases.
I think three in the last 3 episodes.
Yeah, we had Tilly and Dr. Culber and now Saru. And it's like, guys, you've been milking this when it's time to do another plot.
Right. Do you have anything else, Father Corey?
Just a couple small things. There's a small continuity error between the short treks and the scene of the shuttle, where in the short treks it shows that the Lieutenant Giorgio's shuttle was from the Shinzo. It had SHN-03 on the nose.
Right.
And then now in this, they scrubbed out the SHN, so it just said 03 because it was from the Archimedes, not from the Shinzo.
Right. Now that's
if we're doing small continuity errors, also Dr. Culber's hair is notably longer than when he came out of the goopy cockroach pod last episode.
Yeah.
Right.
Speaking of Dr. Culber, one of the kind of notes I have is those scenes, they seemed almost like they were added as an afterthought, in my opinion, where they were just added just for the sake of, well, we got to continue this storyline. Yeah, but they had absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the show, rest of the episode.
It could be running time issues, what they used to in Next Generation call pillar filler, that Michael Piller would write to expand out the running time, and often involved emotional moments and thinking about emotions.
Exactly. And then I got a kick out of Saru getting a little too comfortable in the command chair.
Yeah, that was funny.
I like Pike kind of looks at him and he's like, oh, yeah.
One thing I kind of want to say before we wrap things, we have some feedback I want to get to, but one thing I want to say, we are in these shows, whether it's Secrets of Star Trek or Secrets of Doctor Who or other shows we do, we're often very critical of things and we find errors and things we want to point out. That doesn't mean we don't like the show or we're not enjoying it, but we want to talk about it. We want to look at the good, what didn't work, what we hope will be better. And it helps us to kind of process the show I'm enjoying Star Trek Discovery. I'm guessing you guys do too.
Oh yeah.
And if the shows, if some shows are better than others, that's just natural. Or episodes, and this episode was not as good as some of the others, but I'm still enjoying it. And there was so much to like about this episode, and I just wanted to say that.
If you want proof of that, go back and, we like Next Generation. I think the 3 of us really like Next Generation. But go back and listen to our conversation on Counter Farpoint.
Exactly.
Or our coming conversations on basically every episode in the first 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what they say about the original series, 78 episodes, about a third of them good.
Exactly. All right. So throw that out there. I did want to have a little bit of feedback. We have something from Belinda Rocafort, wrote a comment on SQPN.com. She's been going back, listening to some of our earlier episodes. This is from Secrets of Star Trek number 19, our overview of the Enterprise series. And she said, I had mixed feelings about this series, but after binge watching it around the same time as I listened to your podcast about Where Are All the Aliens, I think she's referring to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World podcast on the Family Paradox. Yep.
Okay.
She says, there are certain ideas manifested in this show that intrigued me. One, that the Vulcans hid their presence from humans during the nuclear age because they were concerned about the primitive nature of our culture. And two, the way that the captain's cynicism developed over the 4 years regarding their original intention to explore and visit with new humanoid aliens, and how they realized over time how aggressive others would be. The development of more sophisticated and powerful weapons became essential. This was pointed out that war and aggression is a basic reality when dealing with beings of higher intelligence. I guess my point is that I like the series better when I could imagine that the writers might actually have known about some of the ideas Jimmy Akin summarized in his podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
So just some interesting feedback there, and how there's a cross-pollination between our different podcasts. So if you aren't listening to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and you are enjoying the Secrets of Star Trek, you definitely will enjoy Mysterious World.
Absolutely.
So, and you can find that at sqpn.com/mysterious. So, before we finish out, I want to do, as I always do, one of the most important things we do is to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Star Trek. Today, I want to thank by name Ryan Z, Jack B, Patricia V, Michael A, and Eric M. Through their generous donations at sqpn.com/give, they make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows we do at sqpn.com. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of The Sounds of Thunder? Let us know by visiting sqpn.com/trek or the SQPN Facebook page, and leave us some feedback on the show there, or send an email to trek@sqpn.com. You can find links to any relevant links on our discussion on our show notes at sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode in Star Trek Discovery, Light and Shadows. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Star Trek.
Live long and prosper, Dom.
And Father Corey Stika, thank you as well.
Well, thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest.